Hi guys, hope you're okay. I thought I'd make another reaction video, but before I do, I wanted to mention my last upload. So I've been off Facebook for nearly a week now, and I feel more alert. My mental health has improved a lot, and I'm getting rid of old habits that I used to always post things on Facebook, you know, with no sort of filter or thought process. So overall it is beneficial for me, but if you're considering leaving Facebook yourself, I would definitely recommend doing that, because again, we're going back to the old times before Facebook. You know, we didn't need all this endless streams of media at our fingertips. So I really recommend coming off Facebook. It'll do wonders for your health. So anyway, if you were a kid in the 1990s like I was, you'll be familiar with brands such as Marathon and Opal Fruits, which today is known as Snickers and Starburst. Personally, I prefer the old names. And Marathon did make a comeback 2 years ago, I think. So, and Opal Fruits as well. But for some reason, Mars, the company, which I thought was British, which it still is technically, changed those products to match international candy names. So this video by Chris Spargo, which is only a day old, is why did Marathon become Snickers? So let's check it out.
In the spirit of international understanding, Marathon has changed its name to Snickers.
Lots of people in the UK know that Snickers used to be called Marathon in this country, and lots of people know that it was changed in order to align the brand with its international counterparts. Which makes sense, except that the same company that makes Snickers also makes Mars Bar. And Mars Bar in America is called...
Now, we've got Milky Way in this country, and it's not the same as the American version. It has no caramel in it whatsoever. It just has nougat and chocolate, but it's very light in the mouth, very tasty. There's actually an advert in the 1990s of two cars, a red car and a blue car, racing, and I think the red car was eating anything in its path, but the blue car was just eating the Milky Way from the clouds. So that symbol, that Milky Way, is lighter. So if you're a kid back then, you could have that for a snack, and then your mother would make dinner, so you wouldn't be put off by the quantity of the chocolate itself. But yeah, Mars makes Mars Bar, Snickers, Opal Fruits, which are now called Starburst. They make a plethora of different chocolates, Twix as well. I would say as a kid I consumed quite a bit of their stuff. Probably explains why I became fat in the late 90s. But yeah, in this country, I'm not too sure if it tastes different in America, because America has a different tastes, different tastes when it comes to chocolate. But in the UK, we are probably deemed the best chocolate in the world, bar Belgium, because Belgium's probably the top one. But yeah, I love Mars's products. Great taste, texture, flavour, everything. So I remember vaguely when I was a kid, when it was called Marathon, and the adverts they showed on TV were always sports based. So my understanding back then was that Marathon and sports were connected. But then when it changed to Snickers, I thought of the word sneakers, as in shoes, trainers we call them in the UK. And somehow I made a connection to that as well. But it turns out it's not even related to sports for some reason.
What we call Milky Way in America is called Three Musketeers. So why was it so important to get rid of Marathon when these names are still allowed to be different?
Yeah, I always thought Mars was a British company, because back in the 1990s it had no reference to the other countries around me. But yeah, I'm sure on their brand it said Mars was made in Britain, which it is. But of course, as we dig further into this video, we know that Mars originated from America. And if you live in America, you'll know that today Hershey's rules that market. They do. I'm sure some little convenience stores do sell both Nestle and Mars candies, but Hershey's rules the roost.
I went digging into this and I found a lot more than I thought I would. I thought this would be the story of Mars Inc., the company that makes all these products. And I mean, it is. It's the story of how they started as an American company and then kind of became a British company for a while and then went back to being an American company. It'll also explain why I'm in this park. But the first thing you need to know about the Mars family is that they are very reclusive and very secretive. Supposedly, this stems from the launch of another Mars product, Ben's Original Rice, or Uncle Ben's as it used to be called.
Yeah, Uncle Ben's. Well, it's now just called Ben's, but yeah, they're a well-known brand for rice, for ready-cooked rice, which I use all the time. I mean, it saves you time boiling rice for 12 minutes in a pan. You just pour it out and put some water in the container and put it in the microwave for 2 or 3 minutes, and then you got nice, fluffy, hot rice. But yeah, I didn't know Uncle Ben's was a part of Mars, but of course Mars is a massive company anyway. It's probably got tons of products that I didn't even know were owned by Mars in the first place.
Ben's, as it used to be called. This was launched during World War II, and apparently Mars spoke a little bit too openly about the process that they use to make this. And in response, the US government threatened to requisition that process in order to feed the troops. And ever since then, Mars has been very protective of trade secrets, and the Mars family are very rarely seen in public. Of course, these days, protecting your personal data is harder than ever, and that's where incognito can be useful. So let's start with a man named Forrest Mars. He was born in 1904 in Minnesota, and his parents divorced when he was young, so he didn't see much of his dad growing up. But his dad went off to Washington State and started a chocolate company. And they had a few different products, there were ups and downs, but it wasn't until Forrest came of age that they reunited and Forrest started getting involved in his dad's company. And it was Forrest who supposedly came up with the idea for their first big hit. Now, out of all of the Mars products, I always kind of assumed that this must have been their original product because it's called the Mars Bar. But as we discussed, the Mars Bar in America is called Milky Way. So actually it's this that was their original product. And the Milky Way absolutely blew up in America. Mars Inc.'s revenue increased by 10 times when they launched it. And Forrest Mars, who was a young Yale graduate, started pushing for more of a role in his dad's company. His dad at this time was enjoying the perks of wealth after a lifetime of struggle. He was buying expensive cars, he built a ranch in Tennessee called Milky Way Farm, and he kept horses. And one of those horses was called Snickers. It gave its name to their next big product, which was effectively just one of these, but with some peanuts in it. But the tensions between Forrest and his dad were only growing. Forrest wanted 1/3 of the business, and Frank didn't want to give that to him. So to find out what Forrest did next, we can just refer to one of the few interviews he ever gave in his life, in which he recounted, "I'm not proud of this. I told my dad to stick the business up his ass. If he didn't want to give me 1/3 right then, I said, I'm leaving. He said, leave. So I left." And so he did. Forrest Mars left America and never saw his dad again. He arrived in the UK in 1932 and founded Mars Confections Limited, one of the first companies to set up in what was then the fairly new Slough trading estate. For their first product, Forrest and the team he put together tweaked his dad's recipe, but actually I haven't been able to work out exactly what they did. We know that they couldn't get Hershey's chocolate to go on the outside of the bar, but instead they struck a deal with Cadbury. In fact, there's a quote from someone at Cadbury looking back on that decision, and he just says,
Cadbury is huge in the UK. Again, I love their products. I love their my favourite product is the caramel, Cadbury's caramel. There is something about the combination of the caramel and the crunchy chocolate in your mouth. It just cracks when you bite into it. It just so, and you got the soft caramel underneath. It tastes so good on the tongue. The texture as well is just gorgeous. But I never thought Mars and Cadbury would ever work together, because they compete against one another in the chocolate industry. But yeah, I suppose in the worst of times you need your enemies to help you out, just like Microsoft did in 1997 with Apple, which was a month from going under. So, but yeah, in the UK, Nestle and Cadbury are the two big players. We have Hershey's in the UK, but it's not sold very well. I mean, my corner shop does sell Hershey's, but I imagine it doesn't sell very well because, I don't know, just Cadbury's and Mars are just far better products. I mean, with Hershey's you have one dimension, you know, you crack into it with your teeth and that's it. But with Cadbury's and Mars you've got texture, you've got layers of caramel, chocolate, you know, nougat, malt, and nuts, even nuts as well. We love nuts here. I mean, I'm funny with that sort of thing because one day I'll enjoy a Mars bar for the pure caramel and the chocolate and nougat, and one day I prefer to buy a Snickers which has nuts in them and caramel and nougat and chocolate. So I don't think I have tried a Hershey's before, but you know, I will always try something once, you know, if I have to. When I went to Paris, I tried Steels for the first time, and on first appearance they looked disgusting, but when I tasted them, delicious, lovely, gorgeous.
thick, rich centre made of fresh eggs, malt and butter, but then I also found it described as having a whipped fondant centre. But whatever the initial version of this product was, it launched under the name Mars Bar. Not long afterwards, Forrest launched his second product, which was called Milky Way. And by the way, it seems like they only sell Milky Way in 2-packs now. I couldn't find just a single Milky Way being sold anywhere. But anyway, the Milky Way we have today is basically like a Mars bar, but without the layer of caramel on top. But I found this packaging from the time, which says that Milky Way has an extra layer of creamy caramel. So I think that might have changed as well. And I'm sure the recipe's changed dozens of times over the years anyway. So we had two separate Mars companies now. Forrest Mars had his company in Britain, and then back in the States, the original Mars Inc. was still being run by his dad. But Forrest Mars seemed more interested in aggressive expansion. He was launching things like Maltesers and chappy dog food. But then in 1934...
Yeah, Maltesers, we've got that here in the UK. To Americans, I think it's malted milk balls. So you bite into it, it's like a catacomb of bubbles. It's very nice to taste, and again, very light to eat. It's a very parent-thought product because you don't want your kids eating all these things and becoming full before they have their tea.
Mars died. And Forrest Mars apparently didn't go home for the funeral, although, to be fair, I suppose that was a bit harder to do back then, but it could have been done. In any case, the business passed to his stepmother, Ethel Mars. But if Forrest Mars couldn't take over his dad's company, he decided he was going to compete with it. He had seen a product in the UK called Smarties, and he thought Americans might like something like that. So he returned to America, teamed up with a man named Bruce Murray, and Murray and Mars came out with M&ms.
I had no idea that M&ms was a byproduct of Smarties. Smarties in the UK isn't what it is in the US. I think Smarties is like a chalky sort of sweet. But M&ms and Smarties are more or less the same, except M&ms have got peanuts in them. I didn't actually know that Smarties was a byproduct of M&ms. Didn't know that. And again, M&ms is well known in the UK, as it is in America.
Which were a huge hit. Before long, Forrest Mars's business empire was bigger than the original Mars Inc. And when Ethel Mars died in 1945, the family entered full-blown succession territory. Forrest finally inherited 1/3 of his father's company, but another third went to his half-sister Patricia, and 1/6 went to her uncle William Kruppenbacher, who was currently running the company. Forrest tried to convince his half-sister to put him in charge, but Kruppenbacher ended up winning her support. At this point, we should discuss the fact that Forrest Mars was apparently kind of the worst. At the M&M factory, he was reportedly prone to explosive fits of screaming and cursing, and now he was turning up to the Mars factory all the time and trying to basically backseat drive the company. By 1964, all of Forrest's rivals had either retired, died, or just given up and sold their shares. So 20 years after his dad died, Forrest finally took over Mars Inc. And he immediately merged it with his own company to create one global Mars company.
Okay, so that was Why Did Marathon Become Snickers by Chris Spargo. A fascinating video, I must admit. I did learn quite a few things from this video, things I didn't anticipate. It is fascinating to know how a company that started from 100 years ago became a worldwide conglomerate. I must consume a chocolate bar maybe once a month. When I was a kid, maybe 3 or 4 a month. Like I say, I haven't tried chocolate in America, but I'm biased and I'm going to say that our chocolate is the best. Not just the UK, but also Europe as a whole. For some reason we have better texture, better flavour, better chocolate, and I've seen countless videos on YouTube of Americans trying our chocolate for the first time, and they always say that ours is the best. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Do give it a thumbs up, I really appreciate that, and while you're there, hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.